Hi, and welcome to the I T'd Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 79. What can a beehive teach us about log aggregation? So bees! Bees are amazing. You know, they do a lot for us. They propagate flowers, trees, plants of all kinds. They create honey. They let us steal that honey. They infest houses with millions of themselves. Okay, I may have gotten off track, but they do a lot of things without really a whole lot of care and effort by humans. Like they've been doing their thing for millions and millions of years, and they're not aggressive, they're not harmful really at all, unless you fuck with them or you hybridize their genome, which turns out may not be a great thing every time you do it. So, maybe scientists should pay attention to Jurassic Park more. I don't know. Anyway, not the point. Wow, way off track. Log aggregation. So what log aggregation is the collection of logs. That's really all it is. We, in IT, utilize a system called a SIM, or System Information and Event Management. This is a process by which logs are centralized into a single point. And the reason for this is so that you don't have to go to multiple places to find those logs, and that you can retain those logs at a single destination for an indefinite period of time. So you can retain them longer. Whereas, if you have a single server, you might only retain your logs for a few days. With a SIM, you can retain them for a few years. So the purpose of a SIM is to collect all of these logs and make them searchable by the user or by professionals, however you want to look at it. Logs are important because they give detail on what has happened on a system, not only by users, but also what the system has done itself. It can identify specific things like what's wrong with the system, if there are any misconfigurations, if there are people who are dumb and haven't set their password in forever, or people who continue to lock themselves out, or if there's an attack. So log aggregation is really important. You can do this through a myriad of ways. There are a lot of products out there and a lot of free products out there that do this, but also you can build it yourself. You can create individual dedicated servers for this. You can have a distributed system. You can pay out the nose and use Microsoft system. And, there's a lot of different ways to do log aggregation. And it's really nice. But if you think about logs like bees, it is an insane proposition to tell you to track one bee in a hive of bees. Isn't it? Like, oh my God, they all look the same. They all appear the same. They all act the same. Bees are very much they're a hive entity. So they don't react. They don't act like a singular being. And so to have millions and millions of bees and to say, oh yeah, you see that one, track it. Make sure you keep an eye on that bee. That is a nearly impossible task, because if you think about it, it's an insane person's proposition. And if, once the bee goes into the hive, oh man, it's almost impossible to find. And that's kind of what you're doing when you are looking at logs and you want to track a specific event through a system. Say, okay, keep track of this event in the logs. And you're doing this across multiple systems and you're trying to find this one specific event. That is not an easy task unless you have a log aggregation system, unless you have a way to identify the logs individually. And so, if you've got logs buzzing around like crazy and you're trying to track one without a SIM, that takes a lot of time. Having to log into a system, having to find the log file, having to identify the log file, parse it, pull the log. By that point in time, the log may no longer be valid, or it may have gotten overridden if you've got small enough logs or enough log generation on that system. And so it's like, if you try to track that bee through the hive, once it goes into the hive, oh, fuck, now I can't see inside of the hive. And I don't know if it came out again or if it's still in there or what. This is an impossible task. It makes it really, really hard. So you use a log aggregation system to kind of see through all of that and really highlight that bee. It's like if you were able to put a really tiny GPS marker on that bee, you'd be able to find it real quick, right? That's kind of what it is with having a log aggregation. You've got the ability to not only search through those logs, but also visualize the logs in a very specific way. So most log aggregation systems that come with at least the capacity to add a visualization aspect to them, if not have that visualization aspect already included. And so one of the additional things that you can do with the sim is see what the data looks like from a perspective of what the logs have. So like, I want to see every event that this user has done, and then you get a nice little graph that shows you their logins or their activity over a period of time, and then you can see the different types of activity that they have, all in a graphical representation, like pie chart or donut chart. You get all sorts of nice little swim lane charts if you need them, all that. And so you can include this data as part of your ability to track down that one elusive bee, to try to find the one piece of information you need to find to attack it, or not attack it, but do whatever you need to do with that information. And again, it's like putting a nice little GPS collar on a bee. They don't make collars that small if checked. And even if they did, man, it'd be massively overweight for that bee to be able to carry. I feel real bad about that. Anyway, the whole point is that if you are operating with a sim and you're able to track these logs, you're able to find the information and you're able to see the log as it goes through the system and then comes back out again. And you can track those events. And if you've got enough logs, you can track you can track an event through the entire process of action, reaction, and result. You can see that sort of as an end goal. So like if somebody logs in through a firewall into a system that has a proxy on it, that has an application on it, you can then see when they hit the firewall, you can see when they log in through the proxy, or when they access the proxy, you can see when they log into the application, you can see all activity within that application, and you can see any traffic that gets egressed because of that activity. You can see all of that data as part of that one session. Now, it would take some doing to do, but it at least is possible with that information. Whereas if you didn't have that log aggregation, it's just a bunch of bees buzzing around your head and you have no idea what the fuck is going on. So yeah, you want that log aggregation there. You want that log analysis so that you can do so you can see everything. And this is important when doing things like combating attacks or detailing misconfigurations and things like that, because sometimes the only way to identify an attack is after it's happened and through the logs. And so being able to see that data is important. Now, this is probably the 20th time I've talked about a sim, about log aggregation in totality across the last few episodes of this podcast. And that's because it's extremely important. And it makes it your life a lot easier. If you have log aggregation, that opens your world up to so many other things in effort to protect yourself and help you as an IT person or as a cybersecurity professional or whatever, as a business. It helps you do what is necessary to get things done. And it's kind of the building block of the rest of the process, because after you get a SIM initiated and set up and you have rules and you start being able to track all of this data, the next thing you can do is implement a SOAR, which is a security orchestration, automation, and response. And you can set up the SOAR to kind of automate how you respond to specific events on a system. And so it's important to have a SIM, because without a SIM, you can't really do a lot. You can't necessarily have a SOAR. I mean, you probably can, but it makes it much more difficult to set up. It makes it much harder to get those actions and reactions set up through the SOAR. So having a SIM is kind of the first step, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important. Aside from that, a lot of compliance standards, a lot of frameworks kind of detail that you need to be able to review access logs, and you need to be able to have a system by which those logs are audited, and you're alerted if there is an anomaly or something incorrect with the logins. And a SIM is kind of really the only way to do that in mass. Like, you could do it just normally if you have a single server, but if if you have more than one server or more than one site or whatever, a SIM is really the only way you're going to be able to aggregate those logs in a way that allows you to do or accomplish that goal, that satisfies that requirement. Now, on top of being able to review the logs, another thing that a SIM does is it allows you to access, or allows you to retain the data, or allows you for data retention beyond just a few days. You can retain your logging information, you can retain your logging data for years. And with certain logging requirements, that can be as long as 5 years. And so, to do that on each and every server across an infrastructure, it's going to be the same data no matter what, but that's a lot of drive space that you end up having to associate with each and every server. Whereas if you associate it with a single point, with that SIM, you've got the ability to grow or shrink it however you might need. I will say that in an environment with a moderate amount of use, with say 200 some odd servers, you're only going to generate maybe a terabyte every year of data, and that terabyte of data can be further compressed or deduplicated if you really want to, but generally you're going to run into a system where you really need to have 1 terabyte a year, and you can grow that as you need to or shrink it. But the also the important part is you can back that information up from a single point as well. You can back it up and make sure you have copies of all your log data, so that way if you ever need to audit back further, you can go back. So a SIM is important. Log aggregation is important to tame the bees. You want to make sure you have these bees tamed, that you can control or at least track where they go and what they're doing. Because otherwise you end up with like green honey or purple honey or whatever, and it makes it really difficult to know when and where that happened. Moreover, as you evolve and mature your infrastructure, having a SIM is going to allow you to create a methodology of identifying those problems that occur with the mature system, and help you be able to reference things that are occurring within the system. So, for instance, if you have misconfiguration of VLANs or misconfiguration of a firewall or misconfiguration of NAT rules, and you create a log system that can track all the data, then it makes it really easy to see where that issue may have occurred or what exactly is happening, without having to bother with systems that aren't necessarily created for that. Because I don't know if anybody else has ever tried to use a firewall to look through logs, but trying to use a firewall to look through logs is fucking awful. It is just the worst. And that's the reason for that is because the firewall is not really made for that. I mean, honestly, if you're looking at a firewall, if you look at the logs, they are hard to read, and it's hard to look through them because they are all just kind of everywhere, man. The firewall is using its CPU to do its job, to do its real job, which is to provide protection and firewall services for the rest of the network. And so, a log aggregation system will help you search through the logs that are being generated from a system that is otherwise very difficult to search those logs. And so, when you're maturing your system, you have this ability to find this data, and you can help yourself when you're attempting to troubleshoot or whatever. And it's important. That's really what I'm trying to get at here, is that a sim is important to keep yourself sane, to keep you tracking the bees, to keep the logs tamed, because without it, you are going to lose sight of your logs. You're going to have more problems trying to find information out. And really, it's just going to be a bad time. And so when you create a sim, the things you need to remember are, if you're going to create a sim, the things you need to remember are, and the considerations you need to have in your mind is, what kind of sim am I going to generate? Like, what infrastructure am I going to use? What backend am I going to use? Am I going to use free? Am I going to have to pay for it? So on and so forth. Remember that free solutions are free because they are more difficult to set up and they are more difficult to maintain. Paid solutions are easier to set up, easier to maintain, have the capacity for rule sets, and allow you to do things that you would normally have to spend more time doing. Whereas, while free is more complicated, it also allows you to do those things, but you get to do them yourself. And so it really depends on what kind of strategy you want to take into effect. Also, you want to plan for if you want to cluster your sim or not. Depending on the size of your environment, you may need to have 5 nodes in a sim cluster. You may need to have 7. You may need to have 12, whatever. But you need to plan on clustering. And then you need to understand and plan for what you're going to do with the data after the sim gets it. Is that it? Is your sim going to be also your alert management system, where you are allowing your sim to alert you, or are you going to set up a separate system to alert you with data from the sim so that the sim has this one job? Are you going to use the visualizations that are part of the sim? Are you going to attach another sim or another graphical solution such as Grafana to your sim? Are you going to feed that data into Power BI? Are you going to do what with that? So you need to have all these considerations in place before you start deploying your sim, because these are things that will end up a problem down the road if you don't plan for them. Also, you need to identify all of the log generating aspects of your environment, which can be difficult because you can always overlook it. One of the most common things to overlook is Office 365. You can get logs from Office 365. There's a way to do that. You can grab your logs from Office 365. You can grab your logs from your servers. You can grab your logs from your firewalls. You can grab your logs from your switches if you need to. You can also set up a mirror port and do a Suricata if you really need to. I don't know any other mirror port solution that works as well as Suricata, so that's the one I bring up. But anyway, if you want to create a sim, if you want to integrate a sim into your environment, these are the ways to remember it. Or these are the things to consider when you are attempting to create it. Because if you don't consider these things, you may overlook something, and it can reduce the effectiveness of your sim. So to have a very effective sim, you want to integrate all of your logs. Now, another question is, do you add the logs from your workstations? And generally, I say workstation logs are kind of useless, because by default, workstation logs don't really catch a whole lot. They really only identify single user events, and they're not very useful. And generally, on a workstation, if you're going to track logs, you're going to have to change the logging mechanism on there pretty significantly. So, but if you have certain aspects of logging turned on, it can be an extremely useful tool, but really only if you're doing threat hunting. If you're not threat hunting within your own environment, grabbing logs from a workstation can ultimately be a little useless, but you can absolutely grab logs just to have them. There's no reason not to, because of how small or how few they are. It will complicate your setup because you will have to consider how you're going to get logs from work from home workstations, how you're going to get those logs into your system. Whereas if you're just grabbing data from everything within a data center servers, then you don't have to really consider how you're going to poke a hole out to the internet to allow traffic into your system. Anyway, that's a lot of data to throw at you. And again, this is all in an effort to tame those bees. You want to tame the bees. You want to make sure that you have those bees so you can get that sweet, sweet honey. And that's all I've got time for today, guys. And I hope you have a great day. Buzz, buzz.